Hi guys, Adventure here. I hope you're doing well wherever you are on the earth plane and in your journey. I'm, there's these ducks over here. Oh my gosh, how fun. I am earthing, my feet are barefoot and touching the ground and sitting here next to a pond, being present. And it feels really good to just be here. But I wanted to jump on and talk to you real briefly about something that I feel really deeply inside of me and have been learning. I've been learning, and it's this concept of radical presence. What I'm doing right now, sitting here calmly by myself, I'm being present. But what happens when we're in the middle of chaos, or we're triggered, or we're having a trauma response? How do we become present in that moment? And it's really this act of radical presence. And what do I mean by that? Well, to be present is to be in our body, to be fully embodied. And when we're in the middle of chaos, or we're triggered, or we're having a trauma response, we lift out of our body. Even though we feel something happening in our body, our mind takes over. And programming and patterns arise and they sort of take over. But to be radically present is to really be in tune with what is happening in your body. And it's not about shifting out of it, although you naturally will. But to be radically present is to pause and to really feel what's happening in your body and to not label what is happening. And what I mean by that is to not give it a story. Oh, I'm feeling this because such and such happened, or something external, or I'm whatever it is. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of things that I've been through very recently where radical presence allowed me to be in the moment and not go to my normal trigger programming. Because both incidences that I'm going to talk to you about real briefly, my past self would have gotten very angry and perhaps gotten up and walked away instead of being able to be present. So the first happened a few days ago, and I had a friend, I was on the phone with a friend, and she was just telling me something about her life. It had nothing to do with me. And yet I was getting triggered. My body was responding to what she was saying. And because her and I are so close, we understand each other really well, and we know that when one of us needs to, we can just tell the other person, hey, can you pause? And they will. And that's what happened. I asked her to pause in the middle of her story, not because I didn't need to hear it anymore, or not because I needed to change the subject, but because I literally needed her to pause so that I could tend to my being. And so I felt in my body this energy that was in my hips and in my shoulders, and it was kind of making me feel stir crazy, and I wanted to attach a storyline to it, but I didn't. I just stayed very present, and I just spoke to her about what was happening in my body, and I breathed through it. So the first thing was that I recognized, oh, my body is talking to me, and I'm having a reaction to something. I don't need a label to what it is, but just to notice, to observe that something is happening in my body. There's an energy that's happening that feels different than where I just was. The second thing is, I felt it. So I observed it, and then I felt it. I allowed myself to feel it. And the third part is I breathed through it. I wasn't trying to make it go away, although it was very uncomfortable, but I just breathed. And my friend actually breathed with me, and then eventually it started to dissipate. And when it dissipated, then her and I actually sort of talked about what had just happened, and then she was able to continue her story. And I was actually able to hear her at that point without having a body reaction. And that was a real pivotal moment for me, because my mind really wanted to create a storyline. And if I had followed that, I may have actually hung up on my friend and sort of thrown a fit. And it's a very young place for me. And we'll get into parts on another video, but just to be radically present was really important, because I was honoring my body, I was honoring where I was, and the energy was able to shift itself through by itself. And I wasn't trying to make it do something else. So when I'm by myself, it's natural for me to become very present, like I am right now with the water and earthing. And so that's one kind of being present. And then when I'm with a close friend, whether it's on the phone or in person, they know me well enough that if I ask them to pause, they can pause. I can feel the energy, so I can observe it, I can feel it, and I can allow it to, as I'm breathing, I can allow it to alchemize and integrate into me. And there's other parts to it, but this is just at a very important stage of learning to be radically present. The other example happened today when I was at breakfast with a friend, and it did have to do with me, what they were talking about. And they were bringing up an idea that I needed to think about. But I was feeling in my body a very big uneasiness, and I immediately noticed, oh, my body is having a response. And because of that, I pushed my feet into the ground and I breathed, and I just became really present. And I didn't ask this friend to pause. I just paused. They were actually waiting for me to respond. And so this was my response, was to not respond to them, but to allow my body to be present and to feel what was happening in my body. And I knew that I would have time later on to process, when I wasn't being triggered, to process what was coming up for me and what my next step was. So I actually couldn't respond verbally to my friend what they were asking of me, other than once I observed the energy, felt the energy, and then breathed through it. At that point, I was able to just respond in the sense of saying, I'm going to need some time to think about what you're offering to me. And it bought me time. It bought me time to be with myself and to not make a decision based off of the emotions that I was having in that moment. And that's a really big thing for me as well. It's a big shift, because the energy that I was feeling was familiar, and that energy I want to push away, and my old self would have either been argumentative or gotten up and walked away. Like, I don't want to deal with this. And I didn't do either of those things. And I felt like that was a really important thing to note, that I was practicing, and not just practicing, but actually actively being radically present, being in my body, being embodied. And that's part of sovereignty.